Okay, my talk is about a constitution or a document. It's a historical document. It's very case-specific, contextual-specific, historical document that was mentioned in the Prophet's biography. And what is interesting about this document is if you look at it, if you read the 47 decrees, how can we categorize it? Is it Sharia in the way we understand Sharia as legally, fiqh, mubah, prohibited, halal, haram, mahdur, as codified ethics? Is it like that? It's not like that. Is it a secular document? It's not, because there is mentioning of God, there is mentioning of the Prophet, halal, ma'ruf, all these things. It's not secular, it's not Sharia. It is a legal document still, but not in the way that we understand Sharia. And it is political at the same time, because it talks to a political community that was composed of Muslims and Jews. And so this is why I was very interested in this document, because it's different, and it also talks to our common concerns today. So from a political science perspective, I'm not, what? Clear? Okay. From a political science perspective today, there are issues that are raised in the West and also in the Muslim world, especially after the Arab Spring. And when Muslim Islamist political parties took power, there was a big concern about what do we do with the constitution now? Now an Islamist political party is taking power. Okay, what does that mean? Are you going to apply Sharia? And what does that mean? What would happen to Christians and Jews and other religions living under an Islamic-based rule? Are you going to force them to follow Sharia? Will you force women to wear hijab? Will you force them to go to prayer, for example, as they do in Saudi Arabia? What does that mean? What are you going to do with minorities, okay? Majority versus minority. There is these kinds of questions that are arising, and unfortunately, there's no clear answer as how to approach these things. So I think this document, what I thought about this document, which is drafted by Prophet Muhammad according to the Seerah, and it was a majority of scholars authenticated it, provides us with some of the answers for some of these questions, and this is why I thought it's very interesting. And what I'm trying to do is actually what some Professor Sachedina mentioned this in the beginning of the. It's not working, but I think my voice is very loud. Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah, I'm a teacher, so my voice is very loud. This is something that Professor Sachedina mentioned earlier, is about how to read a text and derive Islamic principles or values that could be applied, not specifically to a specific case, but could be applied, for different cases. So I'm definitely looking at a specific text. It's contextual, it's historical, it is a specific social makeup. Yet what I'm trying to do, the way that I'm dealing with this constitution, is actually try to derive those Islamic values that are embedded in the constitution that could address issues that we are dealing with today. So this is how I'm dealing with it, and this is how I'll go about it. And of course, we can talk about that later. Now, from a political science perspective, what we have today is the liberal secular model, liberalism. And the major theorist for that, his name is John Rawls, the famous John Rawls. This is the major liberal political theory that is active in modern societies. How do we deal with difference in modern societies? How do we deal with religions? Religion is a private matter. It should not be a public issue. You practice your religion in private, and when you come to the public realm or the public sphere, the political sphere, you should not present your religious arguments or ideology. So when people come together, they discuss issues in a neutral fashion. Okay? You hide that part of you that is private. Why? To avoid conflict. This is how secularism solved the issue of dealing with difference. Okay? There is tolerance, accepting of difference, as long as it does not interfere in the political and public realm. So there is always this separation between private and public. They do not mirror each other. This is something else, okay? That's how modern secularism or liberalism, the theory that we're living in now, deals with the issue. Now, what's the problem with that? The critiques of liberalism, such as communitarianism, which is a political theory by itself. What do they say? They say the problem with this is that it's impractical. If I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Jew, or I'm a Christian, and I'm following that ideology, it's impossible that when I become a politician and I come to the public sphere, that I totally forget about all my ideas. This is something impractical. Or it's something that creates a schizophrenic character. Somebody who is something in private and very different in public. So there's this problem. The other problem is the loss of community. This relationship deals with the central power and individuals, not communities. It's a direct relationship between central power and individualism. That's another issue. They say loss of community, loss of social values is also attributed with this model. Another problem is minorities. What happens to minorities? Minorities are disenfranchised, are not treated equally as majorities. Even if they're given rights, But is it full rights? So for example, in my Islam and secularism class, I asked the students, all of them are American actually, would you accept a Muslim president? They say no, will not take that. So basically it gives the minorities rights, but these rights are sort of also fashioned by the central power. At the end of the day, the minorities are still disenfranchised in one way or another. And this is because we have this kind of separation. The private does not mirror the public and vice versa. So these are concerns that we deal with now, okay? And when I looked at the Constitution, I tried to see if the Constitution deals with these issues, specifically that it is a pluralistic society. Religious-wise, ethnic-wise, it's Muslims and Jews, okay? And actually, according to Al-Waqidi, the Muslims were a minority in the society. They were not a majority, yet the Prophet drafted this Constitution in a very, I think, fair manner, and I'll show how. Another thing about this Constitution is just a very, do you know about the historical background, how it came about? Does everybody know? Should I give a
Summary, very
quick summary is that Arabs and Jews were fighting for more than 100 years in Medina, the city, and they could not settle their differences. And because there are tribes, there is the concept of the vendetta, the blood wit. So when somebody from a tribe kills somebody else from another tribe, the whole tribe is responsible. So they keep killing back and forth, and that was going more than 100 years according to historical books. So what they needed is a third party, an arbiter, somebody who comes from outside and helps them deal with the situation. It happened that Prophet Muhammad was preaching Islam in Mecca for 13 years, and the Muslims were a persecuted minority. They were rejected in their community. Yet the Prophet was known to be as-Sadiq al-Amin, the trustworthy, the honest. So the news were spreading. So they invited Prophet Muhammad with his small group, the immigrants, they were 70 to 80 people, to come to this community and enjoy the privileges of being in the community and protected in the community, okay? With the return, we're gonna accept you, okay? We're gonna host you and you become part of us with the return that you become our judge. There were Muslims already that converted, become Muslims in Medina. But the Jews did not accept Prophet Muhammad as a prophet. This is very important. The Jews did not accept Prophet Muhammad as a prophet. Yet, they accepted him as an arbiter, as a political leader. Okay, so it's a very sort of a complex situation, very interesting. You have different religions. One considers the political leader a prophet, and the other one does not consider him a prophet, consider him as a political leader. So that makes the case more interesting. Now, starting with the concept of the Ummah, which actually this work is part of a bigger work in which I go through the Quran in details, and I come at the end with a definition of an Ummah. So Muslims usually, when you say Ummah, they say, oh, it's the Ummah of Muslims. So it's bound by religion or Sharia. This is the Islamic literature in general, okay? With Orientalists, they say the Ummah is a closed community that's composed only of Muslims or a majority of Muslims, and it's bound also by Sharia, and it's closed, so it's not open. So I refute both of these claims. So I sort of, I go against them. And the proof here is actually in the Medina Constitution itself. So I have the Constitution in the back, and the first decree says, this is a book, or kitab, from Muhammad the Prophet, between the believers, the Muslims, and those who followed them, joined them, and strive along with them. Number 2, it says, they form one ummah, ummah wahida, apart from the people. So the book actually defines the ummah. And the book is not necessarily the sharia as we understand it, sharia of Muslims or sharia of Jews. It's not the sharia. The book could be based on divine revelation, or it could be a political treaty, as such the case here. So when I did the research and the Quran, actually it confirmed this, what we see here in the Sirah, that the Ummah, the basis of the Ummah is actually a document, a constitution. It could be secular, by the way, no problem, but that's the backbone of the Ummah. Sharia or Deen is not the backbone of the Ummah. Here it shows that anybody could be part of the Ummah. If we go further to 25, because there are decrees addressing the believers, decrees addressing the Jews, and then the whole constitution. It says, the Jews of Bani Auf, together with the believers, constitute an Ummah. So what are we seeing here? The Ummah is expanding, okay? We start with the Muslims, and then we add the Jews. And they don't say they are part of the Ummah. That's very important. Together, they are one Ummah together, okay? And then when we reach the end of the constitution, we start seeing a new term here, for example. Or maybe I could use the last one. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, 39. On behalf of the people designated by this document, you start seeing the name Ahl al-Sahifa, the people of this document. And it includes the allies or anybody who wants to join. So saying it's a closed community that is based on Sharia, on one religion, is a problem, because we see this kind of expanding from Muslims, Jews, and then we include Ahl al-Sahifa. So it's actually an open community. Obviously, there is religious pluralism, and the religious pluralism comes with the Jewish part, in which it says they form an ummah together, but for the Muslims, their deen, their religion, and for the Jews, their religion. And what they mean by their deen is not only religion, it's religion and law together. So there is a legal pluralism in that sense. Ethnic pluralism comes in there are decrees which mention each tribe by its name, and it's repetitive. And if you look at it first look, you think it's redundant and silly. Why would you repeat the same command over and over again, and for each tribe? But I think this is about ethnic pluralism, that you're actually recognizing each tribe by name and giving it recognition in a public legal document that affects everybody else. So this affects the concepts of rights and duties and how they are exchanged in a political setting. So my other point that I wanted to make is so it's an open community, obviously, and it's not based on Sharia. I don't want to keep repeating that. What comes next is individual versus collective responsibility. Is the document dealing with communities and meaning tribes and excluding individuals, or is it about individuals and excluding communities? As I said, in the modern nation state, the relationship is directly between the state and the individual. The communities they're formed, it's a private matter, but it's not, a state issue. Here, what happened? Is it individual or collective? And also, we talked about al-ma'ruf, or the public, or the social norms, and law at the same time. How did the Constitution deal with that? How did the Constitution, it acknowledged the tribes, obviously, it's very obvious and very clear in the Constitution, but did it keep the tribal law, or did it start a new kind of law that was very different or even opposing to the tribal law? How did it deal with that? So I'll give you two examples because of the time reference. The first is an example for the Muslims themselves. Number 13. Should I put that? Okay. Number 13. All God-conscious believers shall be against the person who intends to commit an aggressive and unjust act among them. or who aims to infringe one's rights or to cause turmoil among believers. And even if this person is the offspring of one of them, they shall all raise their hands against them. So obviously this is directly against the tribal rules, because for the tribal rules, if somebody from your tribe committed an aggression, you all bond together around him and defend him, right? But for Islamic law, and this is here we see the modification that Islamic law did to the tribal society. So it accepted some things, but changed some things drastically. That's one of those changes. That actually is the opposite. If somebody killed somebody else, then everybody else should go against that person. So it is actually using a social pressure to help implement an Islamic legal order. And we talked about this, I think that you cannot introduce laws if people are not interested in following them, right? And yet, this same condition does not apply for the Jews. It's very interesting. You know, the concept of ma'ruf and munkar, and the best ummah, the ummah wasat, is the ummah that ya'muruna bil ma'ruf wa yanhawna 'anil munkar, is the language that is used for the decrees addressing the Muslim. But when we come to the Jews, it's a very different thing. And this is also very interesting. And this would be Decree 25. So the Jews form an ummah, each one have their religion. This includes them and their allies. And look at this one. But whoever performs an unjust action or commits a crime shall harm solely himself and the people of his house. Okay? There is no mention of social pressure of the believers, that the believers should go against him. But the pressure that is used in this case is based on, and here how the Constitution dealt with each law separately. So with Muslims, it addresses Islamic law or things that they are used to. With the Jews, it addresses their own law, that actually it's you and the people of your house. So the people of your house should exert the pressure rather than the community. And also in dealing with the bloodwit, paying money for somebody if you killed somebody. With the Muslims, it says you can either retaliate or you can pay bloodwit, because the Islamic law allows that, right? But for the Jewish law, there is no concept of bloodwit. And Tabari mentions that, you know, in the Jewish law, this is not acceptable. This idea is not there. So it doesn't use the same thing with the Jews. It says with the Jews, you're allowed to retaliate or deal with it within your own frame of law. So what do we see here? We see here legal pluralism. So we've seen religious pluralism, ethnic pluralism, and also legal pluralism, and how through a political document, the Prophet managed to actually even the use of the language itself, how he used the language to address the community, that the private mirrored the public. And this is very different from what we have today. Private is very separate from the public. No, actually it's a complex situation, but he managed to have this kind of, that they mirror each other, the private and the public. Another thing that he did as well, not everything is in the center. The center is the Prophet. He has he's the arbitrator, he's the judge. Yet not everything gets back to the center. So number 42. Number 42 gives the ruling of Prophet Muhammad. Whatever aggression or quarrel occurs between the people designated on the sheet, and now we're talking about Muslims and Jews together, right? So there are decrees that address the Muslims and how they could independently and autonomously deal in their community, how the Jews can deal in their communities. So there's autonomous, there's giving some autonomy to the communities. But when we come together and we're fighting with each other, then the Prophet interferes at this point. And this is why he mentioned whatever occurs here to the people designated on this sheet should be referred back to Allah and His Messenger. And why Allah before the Messenger? I think this is also important, that the Prophet is not just basing his rule on his personal opinion, that God is involved, meaning that he is, following God's law in whatever solving the resolution. So here we see a balance between the center and the respective communities. Not everything goes back to the center. There is some kind of autonomy given to the respective communities, while at the same time, advocating the center. So that kind of balance, which in the Quran is invoked as the Ummah wasat, and scholars, for example, Sayyid Fadlallah would say that also wasat could be regarded as how individualism and community, how you can juggle or balance those within a political system. So not one side tips over the other, because of course in the modern state, individualism wins over community. And in traditional societies, community is over individualism. When we go back to the Arab world, it's community that rules, not the individual. But within this constitution, you see some kind of balance between both individualism and community, and how the Prophet did it. In the cases of war, that's very interesting. Also one of the questions that come in the modern time, okay, so if you have Christians in an Islamic state, are you gonna make them pay jizya? It's a very question that comes now in the modern time. What are you going to do with other Muslims? They're not going to be in war, and you're going to force them to pay jizya. Well, yes, the Quran says that, but within this document, which is drafted by the Prophet and is part of the Seerah and the Sunnah and confirmed to be part of that, the Jews do not pay jizya. And why? And why the Jews do not pay jizya? Because the Jews are actually, they joined the Muslims in protection. Thank you. They joined the Jews in protecting the Medina itself, and something happened that's very interesting here. In conflict situations, the Muslims were kicked out of Mecca. Literally, that's what happened, which is their hometown. And the enemy now for the Muslims are the people of Mecca, the mushrikeen, the polytheists. Yet, the polytheists are not enemies of the Jews and the inhabitants of Medina, right? Right? So, what do we do in that situation? What if the Jews and the Muslims of Medina do not want to fight the polytheists of Mecca? The Prophet did something very smart. He said, the land of Medina, he declared it as a haram. Haram meaning at that time that it's sacred. You cannot have any blood or killing within the territories of Medina. Which means what? That if Muslims wanted to conduct war with the polytheists, which was expected and happened, what do? You go and fight them outside. Very smart way to deal with the situation. You're not forcing the inhabitants to attack a group that they're not interested in, because you have a very mixed society at that point, which is very similar to what we're going on, what we have today. So that's why I think it's a very interesting document for talking about the concerns that we have today. So if you want to fight, you fight outside the borders. Yet, if Medina is attacked directly and we're going to fight inside, we all should fight equally together. And here I'll go to the decrees some of the decrees that address that. 37. In case of war, Jews bear their expenses and the Muslim theirs. So everybody is gonna, sort of parcel in. Surely they shall cooperate among themselves in opposing those who wage war against the people designated on the sheet. Again, we have this big ummah now. It's not one or the other. And there should be good counsel and advice between them. And the Arabic word used is nasiha. And actually, Talal Asad talks about that in details, the concept of nasiha and how relevant is that in a political, sort of political legal state. It's a very interesting thing, but I don't have time to talk about it today. Observation of one's undertaking eliminates treachery, breaking of treaties. Here it specifies 38. Jews along with the Muslims shall bear the expenses of wars fought together. So it stresses, if you're fighting something together, we're going to bear the expenses together. Another very interesting one, 45. If the Jews are invited by Muslims to make and adopt a peace agreement, they shall make that agreement and adopt it. If the Jews suggest the same thing to the Muslims, they shall have the same rights from the Muslims, except in cases of war over religious issues. Very precise. So if the Jews wanted to make a peace agreement, they shall, the Muslims should abide, and vice versa. But if it's a matter of religious issues, which was a big concern for Muslims at that time, because they were a persecuted minority, this does not apply. Okay? So again, it shows you how complicated the situation is, yet the way to deal with it. It's very interesting. Time is running, so I just wanted to end that. What I'm trying to show in this constitution, and then hopefully I'm building on it for later work, is I'm interested in Islamic political theory in general. Despite that it's a very case-specific historical study, and even despite the Quran itself as not only a faith and a divine document, but also it's a historical document, there is a lot of cases that apply to Muslims at that time, and maybe do not talk to us today, but despite all this, there are, ethical values and general values that can be taken or extracted out of these texts that could answer our questions today. So for example, what do we think of social justice? This is a case of social justice. How do you organize a multi-religious, a pluralistic community? Do we separate private from public completely as the modern liberal state does? Or do we have something else to offer? What is individual versus collective right? Which one wins the other? Or can we have a balance of both? If religion is in stake, which it is in the Muslim societies, and I sort of anticipate that it will stay and it will increase and increase. And you're dealing with other religious groups, how do you deal with that? Do they follow your Sharia? Obviously in this case they're not following the Islamic Sharia in terms of halal, haram, mahdur, mubah. Yet the constitution is embedded in Islamic values that's actually applicable to all, obviously, and the specificities of the cases showed you that. So I think that's it for now, and I'll keep the rest for discussion. Thank you.